Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are moving far beyond the spreadsheets and the simple organizational charts to tackle one of the most persistent questions in the history of business.
Right.
How do you build an organization that is not only highly productive, but also, fundamentally human?
Yeah.
We are diving deep into the work of Rensis Likert, a figure who leveraged decades of rigorous social science to prove that organizational kindness isn't just a corporate buzzword.
No, not at all. He proved it's the most reliable path to sustained profit.
So Likert, born in 1903, an American social psychologist and organizational behaviorist.
And he essentially wrote the blueprint for modern human-centered management.
Our mission today, then, is to really cut through the noise, extract the core methodologies, and, I think, the data-driven insights.
For sure. To understand exactly how Likert defined and crucially measured a truly healthy, productive, human-centered organization.
And the context here is so important. I mean, Likert isn't just another voice offering up management platitudes.
No, he was a scientist.
He arrived in a world just dominated by classical management philosophy. So think of the legacy of Frederick Taylor's scientific management.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the organization was viewed as this finely tuned machine, and the employee was just a component, a cog.
Just a cog designed for specific, repeatable tasks. And that's the key. Like, de Socrates frames his entire career as a direct scientific challenge to that whole mechanistic view.
So the classical school, people like Fayol, they were focused heavily on structure, hierarchy.
Strict rules to achieve efficiency.
Yes.
And Likert recognized that while those approaches might get you some short-term functional order, they ignored the fundamental variable.
Human motivation.
Human motivation. He believed that if you treat people like interchangeable, disposable cogs, you will inevitably achieve machine-level results. Or actually, often frustratingly, sub-machine-level results.
Because you're actively suppressing their intellects.
You're suppressing everything that makes them human. Their intellect, their capacity for self-direction, all of it.
That sets up the central conflict beautifully, then. It's a battle between treating the organization as a rigid structure to be controlled
versus treating it as a dynamic human social system that you have to nurture.
And that leads us right to the core thesis that he spent his life proving.
Participative management. Management based on trust, consultation, and support. He argued it's not just, ethically desirable, but it's the only path to sustained high performance.
So the ultimate hook we're hanging this dive on is Likert's scientific claim. A humanistic organization, what he called System the Fieth, is demonstrably, measurably, and structurally superior and more productive
than an authoritarian organization, or System I. It's a contest between fear and trust, and, Likert came armed with statistical proof gathered over generations to determine the winner.
Okay, let's unpack the foundation of his authority. When we talk about Likert's work, we have to emphasize the sheer scale of his research.
Yeah, this wasn't anecdotal.
Not at all. It was monumental.
The magnitude of the University of Michigan studies is what gives his theories their academic weight. In 1946, he established the Survey Research Center at the University of Michigan.
So he created a dedicated laboratory for organizational behavior.
A dedicated lab. This wasn't a side project. It was a sustained institutional effort.
And sustained is the right word. These studies spanned over 25 years.
25 years.
I think what gets lost sometimes is the actual financial commitment. I mean, to sustain social science research at that level for that long.
Oh, it's enormous. The research endeavor involved a core team of over 40 researchers, and it carried a total price tag of $15 million.
$15 million.
Yeah. And to place that in historical perspective, especially with the purchasing power of money in the mid-20th century, that scale of investment made it comparable to the famous Hawthorne experiments.
Wow.
But, unlike the Hawthorne studies, which were often criticized for methodological flaws and interpretation biases, Likert was aiming for statistical rigor, for longitudinal analysis.
So if Hawthorne gave us the insight that, being observed changes behavior, Likert was providing the hard data on which specific managerial behaviors reliably drive positive long-term results.
That's a fantastic distinction, yes. Likert wasn't content with simple observation. He wanted to establish measurable cause and effect within organizational dynamics.
And this decades-long effort, it all culminated in his two major books.
New Patterns of Management, and then the big one, the definitive text, The Human Organization.
So what's the biggest philosophical shift in those books? What really sets him apart from the classic thinkers?
The shift is, it's fundamental. The classical theorists, they assume that people needed to be controlled because, left to their own devices, they'd be lazy or unmotivated.
Okay.
Likert flips that script completely. The core belief he got from observing dozens of organizations over decades is that human beings are inherently motivated and capable of self-direction.
Okay, so if employees seem unmotivated or lazy, the fault isn't with the worker.
The fault lies with the system, the structure, the policy, the supervision. The management system itself is flawed.
That is a critical paradigm shift, especially for managers who are used to thinking their job is just to apply pressure to get people to work.
Exactly. It forces management to stop viewing their role as simply maintaining compliance, that's the mechanistic or authoritarian organization, System I, and start viewing their role as designing an environment that maximizes human capability.
A humanistic organization, System 2.
Exactly. It changes the question from how do I force this person to work to how do I create a structure where this person wants to contribute their maximum intellectual and physical effort.
And this whole shift, it needed a scientific basis.
Yes, and that's what those multi-million-dollar studies provided. The data, the proof to back up the claim that treating employees well is, in fact, the most financially sound strategy.
To put this into practice, Likert really meticulously categorized the behaviors of supervisors he studied.
He did. He saw two dominant, contrasting leadership styles across all kinds of industries.
Let's start with the traditional approach, what he called Category 1, the job-centered supervisor.
The job-centered supervisor is the taskmaster. Simple as that. Their whole world is defined by task completion and maintaining the immediate routine. Their focus is just rigidly on the output metrics of the job itself.
And how do their actions, reflect that focus?
Their actions are driven by a deep mistrust. They operate under heavy, constant pressure, which they then apply downwards onto their team.
So they fundamentally don't trust their subordinates.
Not at all. They believe that if they look away, the work will stop or the quality will drop. So what do? They set performance targets unilaterally. No consultation with the people actually doing the work.
And the result is micromanagement.
The textbook definition of micromanagement. Intense, close supervision.
This sounds exhausting, not just for the employees, but for the manager, too, who has to spend all this energy monitoring every little thing.
It's incredibly inefficient. And the primary motivational tool is fear.
The carrot and stick.
The classic carrot and stick model. It relies on the threat of punishment or, the transactional promise of some small reward to get compliance.
And it might produce short-term compliance.
It might, but it completely neglects the emotional and intellectual cost of that compliance.
Okay, so let's pivot sharply to Category 2. The employee-centered supervisors, the people-oriented leaders.
This type of supervisor gets it. They understand that the task is merely the output of a human system.
Right.
So their focus is on effective team building, on providing resources, and on managing the human relationships that actually facilitate the work. They're process-oriented, not just task-oriented.
And what are the key differences in their behavior?
Well, they exert very little coercive pressure. Instead, they show high trust in their team's abilities. They recognize their expertise.
So instead of dictating targets,
they consult subordinates before setting goals. This makes the goals feel owned by the team, not just imposed from on high. They practice general or, relaxed supervision. They check in, but they trust their team to manage the details.
and this must have a huge impact on how mistakes are handled. That's always the moment of truth in a company.
It is. So where the job-centered supervisor punishes immediately to reinforce control and fear.
The employee-centered supervisor sees an error as data.
Exactly. They see it as organizational data. They actively help their subordinates when mistakes happen. They treat the error as a symptom of a systemic issue, maybe a training gap, a process flaw, or a lack of resources, not a moral failing of the employee.
And that supportive, non-punitive role is fundamental.
It's everything. It generates loyalty, and it encourages risk-taking, which is where innovation comes from.
This whole distinction sets the stage for what might be the most crucial piece of data Likert ever produced. The switch experiment.
Oh, this is foundational. This moved the entire debate from theory to empirical proof.
So what did he do?
He took matched pairs of similar organizational units, so say 2 administrative departments or 2 production teams. One was high-performing and one was low-performing, and he swapped their supervisor styles to see the long-term impact on productivity and morale.
Okay, let's focus on that first switch. When a high-performing team suddenly gets a heavy-pressure, job-centered supervisor, what happened right away?
The initial result was a rapid, often dramatic spike in productivity.
Which makes sense. Fear works for a little while.
For a little while, it's the momentary efficiency gain driven by fear, the manager breathing down everyone's neck, the immediate enforcement of strict rules, output metrics look great. But that gain was structurally unstable. After that initial spike, the team quickly hit a plateau, and then productivity began a steep and, this is key, irreversible decline.
So the short-term quarterly report looked fantastic.
Fantastic.
But what was actually happening inside the organization that was causing that collapse?
They were burning through their human capital. The intense pressure led to rapid burnout. Employees began engaging in what you could call intellectual withdrawal.
So they stopped offering solutions, stopped collaborating.
Yep. They just did the bare minimum required to avoid punishment. And on top of that, the rates of attrition and absenteeism just climbed and climbed. The supervisor was harvesting intellectual capital without ever reinvesting in the people.
They were eating the organization's seed corn.
That's the perfect analogy.
That pressure isn't a sustainable engine. It's just a volatile drain. Okay, now let's look at the opposite switch. The low-performing teams who got the supportive, employee-centered supervisors.
When the employee-centered supervisors took over, the change was almost deceptively subtle. There was often no immediate spike in productivity at all.
And why not?
Because the manager wasn't demanding immediate, compliant output. They were spending their time establishing trust, consulting on targets, and improving the actual processes.
So the output stayed flat for a bit while the underlying structure, the causal variables as he'd call them, were being put in place.
Exactly. But once that foundation of trust was built, the change became profound. Productivity didn't just climb, it gradually and steadily increased, reaching a sustained level that was often higher than the original high-performing group.
And most importantly,
it was resilient, it was maintained over the long run.
This is the critical takeaway then. Managerial pressure, system-wide behavior, it's an unstable volatility amplifier. It delivers temporary gains at the cost of long-term organizational health.
While long-term stable and resilient success, the system fee output requires investing in trust, team health, and loyalty.
It proves that the investment in supportive relationships is an economic necessity.
Not a moral luxury. The stability shown by the system fee teams under stress, their low attrition rates, their continued willingness to contribute discretionary effort, that's where the true, sustained financial dividend is paid.
Okay, so building one of these system fee organizations, it takes more than just telling managers to be nice.
Oh, much more. It requires deep structural and philosophical commitments. And Likert stressed that effective supervision has to be adaptive. It can't be a fixed set of rules.
That's a really sophisticated point. He argued there's no single universal management style.
Right.
So what works for, say, a team of veteran engineers with high autonomy might fail spectacularly for a new entry-level assembly line crew.
And that adaptability, this need to approach management as a flexible human process, it aligns really closely with earlier thinkers like Mary Parker Follett,
who emphasized dynamic coordination over static command and control.
Exactly. The leader has to constantly mold their approach to fit the reality of the people and the mission.
So to achieve this adaptable high-trust environment, Likert codified what he called the principle of supportive relationships. What's the ultimate requirement of this principle?
It's a very demanding requirement. It states that a manager must ensure that in every single interaction an employee has with the organization, they feel that their personal worth and importance are affirmed.
Every single interaction, so not just the annual performance review.
No, it's the daily micro-interactions, the tone of an email, how dissent is handled, how feedback is delivered, all of it.
So the goal isn't just to make them feel comfortable. It's about providing a kind of psychological security.
A security that allows them to fully engage. Precisely. If interactions consistently affirm their worth, the employee develops a fundamental sense of belongingness.
They feel valued.
They feel valued as an integral member of the team and the mission. And that sense of belonging is the fuel for discretionary effort, the willingness to go above and beyond the job description.
And we see the opposite when this principle is missing. The source material mentions a critique of Government of India employees lacking initiative because their supervisors failed to create that supportive relationship.
That example highlights a universal truth. Initiative is inherently risky. And if an organizational structure or a boss suggests that risk will be met with public humiliation or punishment, the opposite of a supportive relationship, then intelligent employees will rationally choose to withdraw that initiative. They'll stick only to the defined, safe tasks.
And that's how an organization systematically kills its own innovative capacity.
One bad interaction at a time.
So how does Likert propose we structurally support this principle across a large, complex organization? This is where the linking pin model comes in.
Yes, this is arguably his most unique contribution to organizational design. The linking pin is the mechanism that ensures System 5 principles aren't just stuck in small teams.
It's a solution to that age-old problem of information filtering up the hierarchy.
An elegant solution. The core concept is that a linking pin is an individual who simultaneously serves two defined roles. They effectively bridge two hierarchical groups.
Okay, walk us through those two roles.
First, they are a member of the higher level group they report to, the management committee, the executive council, whatever it is. Second, they are the leader of the lower level group they manage, their own team of subordinates.
So if I manage the marketing team, I sit in the quarterly executive meeting as a contributing peer, and then I go back to my team as their leader. I am literally the connection point.
You're the function. And that has profound implications. This person acts as the essential link, or pin, transmitting information not just down, but robustly up.
So they're structurally mandated to represent their subordinates' views.
Their concerns, their expertise, the ground truth from the front line, all of it goes up to upper management. And in turn, they convey management's decisions and rationale back down to the team.
Okay, this sounds great on paper, but I have to throw a challenge in here. Doesn't this put that linking pin individual under immense pressure?
It does.
They're managing potentially conflicting demands, conflicting loyalties. How does Likert address the psychological strain of being stuck in the middle?
That is the critical management challenge of the model. And Likert implicitly acknowledged the skill set required. The successful linking pin has to have a high degree of emotional intelligence, of political savvy.
They're constantly navigating dual loyalties.
All the time. Loyalty to their management peers and loyalty to their subordinates. They have to act as a translator, ensuring that upper-level decisions, even if they're unpopular, are presented with context and rationale.
And that lower-level dissent is presented to the top constructively.
Right, without being filtered out just because it's inconvenient.
So the benefit is clear. It formally ensures upward communication and genuine participation. It allows ideas from the lowest levels to reach the top. But the execution really relies on training and supporting those individuals to manage their dual roles successfully.
Exactly. Otherwise, they just burn out or become ineffective bottlenecks. The model only works if the organization recognizes and rewards the complexity of that linking pin role.
Which circles right back to the principle of supportive relationships.
The structure has to reinforce the philosophy.
So that structural element is vital. But to diagnose an organization and, track progress, Likert needed a comprehensive scale.
He did. He organized management philosophies into a 4-point continuum. This allowed managers to identify exactly where they stood between the worst and the ideal.
It's like his diagnostic map.
It is. Let's start at the absolute worst. The model of command and control derived from pure classical theory, System 1.
System 1. Exploitative authoritative. So what defines this environment?
Maximum control. You see a steep, rigid hierarchy. Communication flow is almost entirely top-down, and it usually involves orders, not information.
And the defining feature is trust.
A complete lack of trust in subordinates. They are explicitly viewed as lazy, incapable, or untrustworthy, requiring constant coercion.
So motivation must just be in the gutter.
It's driven solely by fear, threats, and sanctions. Decision-making is completely centralized at the very top. Participation is zero.
So System 1 maximizes bureaucracy, fosters hostility.
And ensures minimum intellectual engagement from the workforce. It's optimized for compliance, but not for productivity.
Okay, moving up a notch, we find System 2, benevolent authoritative. It sounds better, but what's the catch?
The catch is that it's just authoritative management with a thin veneer of paternalism. The hostility might be lower than System 1, but the underlying structure of control is exactly the same.
So managers frame their decisions as being for the good of the organization or for your own good.
Right. It gives a superficially kind or benevolent impression.
So what's the psychological difference? In System 1, the manager hates the employee.
In System 2, the manager perhaps likes the employee, but fundamentally believes they are too immature or unskilled to manage themselves.
I see.
So while rewards might be offered instead of just punishments, the process is still fundamentally not democratic, power is highly centralized, consultation is minimal.
So employees might feel cared for, but they also feel deeply limited.
Exactly. Limited in their capacity to contribute any meaningful ideas.
Okay, now we're getting into the territory of partial participation with System 3, consultative. Where do the power dynamics shift here?
System 3 is a significant step because the manager finally acknowledges the value of subordinate input. Supervisors actually start consulting employees, soliciting suggestions, and discussing problems openly before making a decision.
But this is where that critical power limit comes in, isn't it? The difference between being consulted and having a real say.
Absolutely crucial. While the employee has a voice, they still do not have a vote. The final say always, without exception, remains with the superior.
And that can lead to its own kind of frustration.
Oh, for sure. If you offer an innovative solution and it gets ignored repeatedly, that initial enthusiasm of being consulted can quickly curdle into cynicism.
And delegation in System 3.
It typically only extends to middle management, so the frontline employees often still feel like their environment is largely non-participative because power hasn't really diffused down to their level.
And finally, the pinnacle, like the assertor's ideal structure. System 4, the participative democratic model.
This is the organizational ideal. Structurally, it's often much flatter, with strong horizontal and cross-functional linkages, the kind of thing supported by the linking pin concept.
And the defining characteristic is radical trust.
Complete confidence and trust in subordinates at every single level.
So how does that transform communication?
It becomes a dynamic, transparent, three-way street. Communication flows robustly up, down, and laterally across teams. Everyone is well informed, and their input is solicited and integrated.
And because that trust is there, dissent is seen as constructive.
Exactly. And this system, Likert found, uniquely generates both the highest levels of motivation and the highest, most sustained levels of productivity. The work is owned by the people who are actually performing it.
The ability to categorize organizations into these 4 systems gave Likert a great diagnostic tool.
It did, but to truly guide change, he needed a scientific mechanism for measuring organizational health that went beyond, the quarterly financials.
He argued that traditional metrics only measure the end result. They don't measure the causal inputs that determine the organization's future.
Right, so he sought to create a scientific, objective framework for measurement. This involved defining 3 distinct types of variables and their specific relationship.
Okay, let's start with the first category, the inputs. The things managers directly control.
Those are the causal variables.
And what falls under that category?
Causal variables are the independent variables. The organization's structure, its foundational policies, and, most critically, the management's leadership style.
So the conscious decision to operate like a System 1, 3, or 4 leader.
Yes. These are the levers that management pulls. If a manager decides to implement a new performance review policy, that is a causal variable adjustment.
Okay, next we see the immediate internal reaction to those inputs, the intervening variables.
These are the internal state variables, the mood or the organizational culture that results directly from those causal inputs. This is the hardest category to measure, but the most predictive of long-term health.
So this is things like employee loyalty, overall motivation, conflict levels.
Communication effectiveness, employee attitudes toward the company, all of that. If you pull a System 1 lever, like installing time tracking surveillance software,
you'll immediately see a degradation in your intervening variables. Lower trust, higher stress.
Instantly. And that leads to the final category, the outputs, the numbers everyone typically focuses on, the end result variables.
The attendant variables.
Yeah.
The final measurable outcomes that hit the balance sheet.
Earnings, profit, sales volume, cost efficiency, quality metrics, they are the ultimate lagging indicators.
So the flow of influence is absolutely rigid then. Causal actions determine the intervening health, which ultimately determines the end results.
Yes. And this provides a scientific basis for understanding the instability we saw in the switch experiment.
How so?
A System 1 supervisor applies the causal variable of heavy pressure. That temporarily boosts the end result, the production spike. But that same pressure simultaneously crushes the intervening variables, loyalty, trust, morale.
So this framework alerts a manager that their immediate gain is predatory.
They're borrowing from future capacity. If your intervening variables are poor, today's good profit is masking tomorrow's guaranteed collapse.
This is powerful, but let's tackle the challenge head on. For the listener, how did Likert propose scientifically measuring those soft intervening variables like loyalty or attitude?
It's not just about asking people, hey, are you loyal?
Right.
Likert used detailed, psychometrically sound questionnaires, but he also integrated objective behavioral data. Measuring loyalty and attitude wasn't just a score on a 5-point scale.
It involved analyzing measurable behaviors.
Things that reflect organizational health. Low turnover rates, low grievance rates, the volume and quality of constructive suggestions submitted by employees, the incidence of waste or sabotage, union activity levels.
So those behavioral manifestations provide tangible evidence of the underlying state of trust and motivation.
Exactly. It makes the intervening variable a sophisticated index, not just a morale survey.
Let's apply this with a concrete example of cause and effect.
Okay, let's use the causal variable of policy. Suppose a tech company, under pressure for speed, implements a new causal variable, a policy of mandatory weekly 50-hour minimum work weeks, no matter what.
Okay, how does that impact the intervening variables?
Immediately, stress levels increase, perceived workload fairness plummets, and employee attitude becomes negative. We might see an increase in passive aggression or quiet quitting behaviors.
Right, and then we track the end result variables.
So while input hours increase, which is a short-term output, after 3 to 6 months, we observe the delayed but devastating impacts. Higher error rates in the code, increased product defects, and a spike in voluntary turnover of high-value employees who are now burned out.
The positive causal variable change more hours is scientifically proven to lead to negative end results.
Yeah, the degradation of intervening variables. It forces managers to manage the system, not just the numbers.
Now, moving an organization from, say, System 1 to System 4 is not a sudden flip.
No, Likert stressed extreme caution against abrupt changes.
Why is that?
Abrupt change is almost always fatal, especially when you're dealing with trust. Likert warned that jumping from an authoritarian structure to a fully participative one overnight can paralyze the organization.
Oh, so?
If trust is suddenly granted to people who are used to being tightly controlled, they may struggle with the responsibility. They may even misuse the new freedom.
And management might misinterpret that.
They might see it as evidence that the benevolent approach doesn't work and then snap back even harder.
So he proposed a deliberate 5-step gradual improvement cycle. How does a manager approach this?
First step is visionary. Define the ideal model, usually System 4. You have to know where you're going. Step 2 is diagnostic. Use that causal intervening end result framework to measure your organization's current score against that ideal.
Step 3 is the deep internal assessment. You diagnose the specific weaknesses and strengths revealed by that measurement.
Right. Where are the intervening variables strongest? Where are they collapsing? This requires a lot of honesty.
Step 4 is creating a precise action plan.
A plan that focuses exclusively on adjustments to the causal variables, so targeted leadership training, minor policy adjustments, or structural changes like initiating small linking pin groups. Things designed to nudge the intervening variables in the right direction.
And step 5, implementation, must be gradual.
Incremental changes. This allows the organization to slowly learn, adapt, and build the musculature of trust without suffering the shock of total, immediate transformation. It's about sustainable systemic evolution, not radical revolution.
So one of the crucial intervening variables that measures organizational health is the level and type of internal conflict.
Right. And Likert, much like Mary Parker Follett before him, understood that conflict isn't something to be stamped out entirely.
They shared the view that conflict is just inherent to human interaction.
And its utility, whether it becomes a force for innovation or destruction, depends entirely on the management system and how that conflict is handled.
So Likert delineated 2 profoundly different types of conflict. Let's start with the beneficial kind.
That is substantive conflict. This is conflict rooted in the task, the work itself, the ideas, the process, the resources.
So a healthy disagreement over marketing strategy.
Or the technical specs of a product or which vendor to use. If it's managed in a trusting environment, this type of conflict is constructive. It tests assumptions, it surfaces hidden information, and it usually leads to a superior outcome.
And then there's the dangerous one, effective conflict.
This is the destructive kind. It's rooted not in the task, but in emotions and interpersonal dynamics.
We're talking about personality clashes.
Personality clashes, deep-seated resentments, hostility driven by past slights, or conflicts over personal credit and status. Effective conflict just drains energy, destroys trust, and rarely, if ever, leads to better business outcomes. It only creates organizational scar tissue.
I have to challenge this, though. Doesn't a manager often struggle to separate the two? A substantive debate over a budget can quickly devolve into an effective one if old resentments come up.
That is the essential management challenge. In a System 1 or 2 organization, almost all substantive conflict immediately devolves into effective conflict because there's no underlying trust to hold the discussion steady.
So in System 4,
In System 4, the manager's primary goal is precisely to minimize that effective spillover so they can successfully resolve the substantive issue productively.
so that supportive relationship isn't just about being friendly, it's a necessary buffer against emotional decay during disagreements.
Absolutely. And when it comes to resolution, Likert strongly advocated for a win-win strategy, which he called integration.
Which is better than just compromise.
Much better. In a compromise, both parties often feel they've given up something essential, leaving them partially dissatisfied. Integration, however, requires creative problem-solving to find a novel solution that satisfies the core underlying needs and goals of both parties simultaneously.
Can you give us a tactical example of how a manager would separate these two kinds of conflict?
Sure. Imagine two department heads, Sarah and John, arguing intensely about which product line gets the limited R&D budget. The debate over the technical merits is the substantive conflict.
Okay.
But if the manager observes John bringing up an old mistake Sarah made 2 years ago, or if Sarah starts shouting personal insults about John's leadership style,
That has moved into effective conflict.
instantly, and the manager cannot proceed with the budget debate at that point.
What do they do?
Their tactical advice, according to Likert, must be to immediately address and minimize the effective conflict, pull them aside, insist on professional respect, perhaps mediate the interpersonal resentment before returning to the substantive debate over the R&D dollars.
Because if the personal conflict isn't addressed, the technical debate will forever be polluted by emotional bias.
It will. This all circles back to the system RD environment. If the organization has already cultivated high trust and supportive causal variables, the likelihood of a substantive debate collapsing into destructive effective conflict is dramatically lower.
Which makes problem solving way more efficient.
Exactly. High trust allows for productive disagreement. Low trust ensures that any disagreement, even over the smallest task, becomes personal and corrosive. Likert's analysis gives us the roadmap for creating the conditions necessary for constructive conflict.
Rensis Likert's legacy is profound because he took the seemingly soft elements of organizational life trust, attitude, communication, and he subjected them to the rigorous demands of hard science.
He did. His work, culminating in the massive Michigan studies, proves that leading with empathy and science is fundamentally superior to managing with fear and intuition.
We've seen the undeniable evidence in that switch experiment. The quick, unstable financial spikes from coercive, job-centered supervision are just short-term gains that erode your human capital.
And in stark contrast, the sustained, resilient, high-level productivity achieved by employee-centered management is the only path to long-term valuation and organizational health.
And structurally, he gave us the linking pen model, a concrete, measurable way to ensure that participation isn't just a suggestion, but a formal requirement.
A way to break down silos and guarantee that frontline intelligence flows directly to the executive suite.
So Likert's core message, synthesized across all 4 systems, is this.
Productivity is not a function of external managerial pressure. It is a direct result of an organizational design that maximizes employee trust, fosters a sense of belongingness, and affirms the perceived personal worth of every single team member.
So what does this all mean for you? Likert's most powerful innovation might be his scientific measurement system, the causal, intervening, and end result variables.
Right.
This framework challenges you to stop only managing the lagging indicator, which is profit, and start managing the leading indicators, which are policy and morale.
So here's the final provocative thought for you to chew on. If you were applying Likert's framework to your current professional environment, how would you move beyond simple guesswork to scientifically quantify those intervening variables? Loyalty, attitude, motivation, conflict using objective behavioral data like turnover or suggestion volume.
And once you have that data, what single high-leverage causal variable, a policy adjustment, a structural change, or a leadership training initiative, would you choose to adjust first, and most gradually, to ensure a sustainable shift towards System 5E's success?